and we're ready for our first of two panel discussions. First of all, thank you to Hero and to GBHEM, Myron as well. I appreciate this opportunity. This is probably the largest group I will have ever coached. Never coached 400 people before, so I'm going to do my best. I'm kind of a novice at this. But we have two panel discussions today. The first one, the panelists are before you. And I've had the privilege of being on the phone with the three of them as a group. And while I enjoyed hearing from each of them, the richest part was when all three of them kind of, without any of my help, just started interacting with each other. And some really great conversation came out. And so we decided that each of them would have about 10 minutes to speak on the topic of developing effective leaders. And then we'd do our best to get right back into that trialogue that was so rich when we were on the phone earlier. Our goal then is, after some robust discussion in the front with our panelists, we want you to have some table talk. And so we want you to have some robust conversation today as well. And so our goal is to do all of this by about 10:15, take a break, and then move into our second panel discussion. So let me invite our first panelist, Dr. Fred Allen, to come forward and talk to us about developing effective leaders.
Thank you, Val, and to Hero, and to the Journal Board of Higher Education and Ministry, and to my co-panelists, and to each of you. I thought and prayerfully contemplated what could I say to such an audience that would lead us to looking toward developing effective leaders, pastors and lay leaders. So I have decided that I would choose kind of as a subtitle, Pastor or Leader, or Pastor and Leader. I heard a story once that really kind of caught my attention. There was this captain in the Army who had just been elevated to a general, and he had moved into his new office, which was beautifully decorated. And he's sitting there in his office, just kind of taking it all in. And suddenly, a knock on his door. And so he picked up the phone and started talking. "Yes, sir, Mr. President, it was really nice to have dinner with you and your wife last night. And as soon as we get settled in, we will invite you." So he said to the man as he walked in, "Yes, sir. Who are you and how can I help you?" "Excuse me just a minute. Mr. President, I'll be right back with you. I'll give you a call later on today." Hung up the phone. And the young man proceeded to say, "I'm Sergeant Joe. I'm here to connect up the phone." So one of the most important elements that I think that helped to propel me in effective ministry has been to be connected. Be connected to God, a power source that is beyond our power. Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. So you must be in a prayerful mode in order to be effective. Since we seldom identify our daily professional choices and behavior in terms of the particular role selection, it tends to occur at an unconscious level. And since common pastoral scenarios now demand a choice of role for us, we may not be using a clear rational process. This can lead to ambiguity within us. It can lead ambiguity within our parishioners. Such ambiguity tends to, I think, generate confusion, stress, conflict, and sometimes even abuse. So think about this with me just for a minute. I don't have all of the answers, but I do see this choice looming in the background of many congregations and even in healthy congregations across this country. When each of us bring our best theology, our best polity, our best experience, and sense of call to this experience and this exploration, each of us is likely to be clearer about our choice, and this will benefit all of us together. Next slide. Let the Word begin and become flesh. These are some very characteristic elements that I believe that will help to affect us to become effective ministers. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and the only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. We have got to, in fact, incarnate and manifest the life and ministry of Jesus through our preaching so that the Word becomes real, alive, and intimate with all of us. Next slide. Make a difference. Take the Wesleyan risk. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions. And he continued, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. Mark 7, 8 through 9. Next slide. One of the things that I'm just now discovering as I stand here now, what I think will make an effective ministry is not only to acknowledge your vulnerability, but you also have to be humble. This is an awesome task to stand before almost 400 people, friends and colleagues, and attempt to give some kind of advice and some kind of role that might lead to effective ministry. Next, right here. Make a difference and dwell among us, that is, in reaching out and reaching in, going outside and beyond the boundaries. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son of God, who came from the Father, full of grace and of truth. Next slide. And the next, please. Can we be both pastor and leader? I think we can. Being a good pastor means we will be leaders in some ways and some circumstances. However, being a leader does not make us pastors. In this time of massive change, old roles, symbols, and behavior no longer have the same meaning for all people in all settings. We must now be decisive about our role as identified spiritual leaders because expectations and possibilities are in flux, and there are many more professional and specialized roles available than in previous centuries. Contemporary circumstances in organized religion and in society gives us mixtures of ethnicity, race, class, sexual orientation, gender, and religious heritage that were not typical in previous generations. Since our professional training was oriented toward pastoring of traditional congregations, our traditional guidelines are inadequate. We must sort through a variety of changing expectations and options continually as ongoing. Formerly, we could pursue our role obligations with confidence and relaxation. Now, we use more energy and experience and more stress while making many more decisions about how to handle pastoral duties. The continuous and escalating stress is producing more burnout, more depression, and more breakdown than have been normal for pastors in the past. Learning how to make and live the selection of a professional role can reduce our stress levels significantly. It clarifies our goal and ties us into our training and heritage. Instead of being all things to all people, we can just relax and be human and to be just a pastor. Thanks be to God. I had a stroke just 2.5 months ago. And because of all of this stress and the strain and trying to do all things, be all things to all people and be everywhere, that affected my emotions and also my physical being. there must be a time of comfort. We must take time to relax and to unfold and to regroup and to reclaim the healthiness of which God has given to us. So we must step back, find some space for relaxation and some loving fun and care. Learning how to make and live the selection of a professional role can, in fact, reduce significant levels of stress, strain, competition, fear, and anxiety. Our choice is still not simple, however. All the changes in parishes, our denomination, and seminary generate the following deviations. Presumption. Go to the next slide. Our choice is not simple. Here are some presumptions. Pastors are trained, skilled, and supervised appropriately. The reality, pastors are trained, skilled, and supervised, but not necessarily in ways appropriate to local needs and contemporary changes. Next slide. Presumption. Leaders are able to guide others toward appropriate goals in ways satisfying to all followers. The reality, some leaders are charismatic and capable of overriding confusion, inertia, and competition in order to satisfy all followers. Maybe not. Next slide. Presumption. Congregants are basically literate, polity informed, spiritually disciplined, open to pastoring guidance. The reality, congregants tend to think as customers and stockholders. Some are open to spiritual growth, good pastoring, and sincere later leadership. Next slide. Here are some emerging prescriptions. Doing our homework on what is really going on in our congregations and inside ourselves. Sweet hour of prayer has been one of the things that have sustained me, not only in the parish, but in the current administrative position that I hold. Sweet hour of prayer that calls me from a world of care and bids me at my Father's throne make all my wants and wishes known in seasons of distress and grief. My soul has often found relief and often escaped the tempter's snare by thy return, sweet hour of prayer. Change. Deep change, as pointed out by Robert Quinn in his book entitled Deep Change. When a basketball is placed in the hands of a master like, quote, Oscar Robertson, I will transfer and use the name LeBron James, magical things happen. The talented master has the ability to become a leader who induces change. The leader can transform separate individuals into cohesive teams. So linked, these individuals can communicate without words. They can capture the imagination of larger communities, enticing them to dream new dreams. Even the most tightly held prejudice in some population can be muted. In the end, excellence is infectious. We have always had to agonize over the choice between making deep change or accepting deep and real death. Today, however, the dilemma is more blatant. As soon as we find meaning and equilibrium, it is distorted. We must continually choose between deep change or choose that of ultimate death. Deep change means surrendering control. One key to successful leadership is continuous personal change. Personal change is a reflection of our inner growth and empowerment. Empowered leaders are the only ones who can induce real change. Denial is one of several clear paths toward slow death. When we practice denial, we work on the wrong solutions or no solutions at all. The problem grows worse as we become discouraged and our vitality level declines. Almost to the end, visionary. we must all have the capacity to see through God's eye for big possibilities for all of our churches, small, medium, large, or mega. Every church, every congregation has a unique ability and position to be as big spiritually, and it's more, I think, more of a measurement of success and vitality depending on the impact that is made within your community in which you exist. As God has a will for a person, so God has a will for the churches. God's will is that small or large membership churches in communities everywhere live up to their potentials and led by a prophetic and dynamic, inspirational leader. And last but not least, I believe that we must all have and come to the table with a real sense of passion, a real sense of excitement and exuberation about our call to ministry and about building the kingdom of God that will bring about justice and fairness for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred, and I'd like to invite Ted to come forward.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and to have part in this panel discussion with Fred Allen and Gail Ford Smith and Coach Val here, so good to be with y'all. I am not getting my signal up for the remote here. Want me to check the network? I'm on the orange network. We are looking. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a historian's perspective on looking for creative, self-starting, and what we might call entrepreneurial church leaders. Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. And what I have to offer is the perspective of a historian. I'm basically going to tell you about two, if you will not mind me calling them kick-ass Methodist Episcopal Church itinerant ministers of the early 19th century. That's a technical theological term there. As soon as we have some images up on the screen, I'm going to be able to move forward with this. So see what's up here. Y'all use that term in your Board of Ordained Ministry, don't you? There we are. Okay. We've at least got an image on the screen. I still do not have a signal for my controller here, so what are we going to do? Okay, I'll call out next slide. Okay, identifying, encouraging creative, self-starting, entrepreneurial clergy candidates. I want to begin by showing you some statistics you may have seen before about the membership of the Methodist Episcopal Church and then the combined Methodist Episcopal and Methodist Episcopal Church South in the 1900s. We estimate, these figures are from the Encyclopedia of World Methodism, that the membership of the ME Church in 1800 was 65,000. By 1825, the membership of that denomination was 341,000. Doesn't take a lot of math to figure out that that is an almost 4 times growth in church membership in a period of 25 years. You see the same thing in the next 25-year period. By 1850, after the division of these two churches had combined, and I'm only counting ME and ME South at this point, their combined membership was 1.4 million, again, a nearly 4 times growth in that 25-year period. In the next 25-year period, you see growth has slowed down to about double or a little less, 2.2 million by 1875, and similarly by 1900, 4.1 million. The question we might ask then is, what accounts for this absolutely remarkable growth, especially in the early part of the 1800s? What I want to suggest to you then is that it was not only itinerant ministers following the American frontier as it developed in that period. That's part of the answer that was suggested by the famous Methodist historian at the University of Chicago, William Warren Sweet, who later taught at Garrett and then at Southern Methodist University. That was his great thesis. I would add the cooperation of local Methodist stewards who were very often instrumental in founding local societies and then calling conferences to send preachers to them. If we could have the next screen then, I want to tell you a little bit about one of our itinerants in the southwestern United States. His name was William Stevenson. I don't have an image for him, so you get a sunset from the southwest. If you could move to the next screen, I'll tell you a little bit about his career. He was born in 1768 in the town of 96, South Carolina. I talked to a South Carolina delegate this morning that's still in the conference and in, I think, the Greenville district. In 1792, the year after John Wesley was born, he set out for the Tennessee country. He settled in Greene County, what is now the Holston area, in that year. At that point, a county of North Carolina, but which became part of the state of Tennessee 4 years later in 1796. In 1797, he had married a woman named Campbell from Virginia, probably one of my relatives from the Shenandoah Valley. In 1797, he went up and stayed with her family. While there, he went to Kentucky in 1798, put in a year of crops and raised them, and while there, had a dramatic conversion experience that he describes. In 1800, he moved his entire family to the area of the Cumberland River in Tennessee, just north and east of present-day Nashville. He had a not so dramatic experience of entire sanctification, followed by his desire to become a class leader and a local preacher. If we could move to the next slide. Between 1809 and 1810, he moved to Missouri. You'll realize how early after the Louisiana Purchase and the exploration of Missouri this was for him to move his family there. He was a witness to the horrific 1811 New Madrid earthquake that shook that entire part of the world. In 1813, his brother invited him to go down to the Arkansas Territory, and without any invitation from a district committee on local church location, he preached in the Arkansas Territory and began organizing Methodist societies there. In 1815, he was admitted on trial in the Missouri Annual Conference and was ordained deacon, I believe by Bishop Asbury, but I think Bishop McKendry was present there, one of the last times that Asbury would perform ordinations. In that year, he returned to Arkansas, and he notes that in 1815, he crossed the Red River at a point near Texarkana and preached at a colony of Euro-American and African-American settlers there called Pecan Point. So next year we will celebrate the 200th anniversary of Methodist preaching in Texas, and we will republish his autobiography at that time. In 1817, he was ordained an elder and admitted to full connection in the Missouri Conference. In 1820, living in in Arkansas Territory, he was a representative to the Arkansas Territorial Assembly, and he made the motion to select Little Rock as the capital of the state. In the same year, he was made the presiding, not the eider, but the elder of the Hot Springs District in the Missouri Annual Conference. He received funding from the Missionary Society of the M.E. Church. In 1826, he shifted his allegiance to the Mississippi Annual Conference and became presiding elder of the Louisiana District when he settled in Louisiana with his large family. His son, James Stevenson, was an illegal alien in East Texas who crossed the river into Mexican Texas in 1833 and established the longest continuous Protestant congregation in Texas, what is misspelled with two letters A, but should be spelled with a letter A and a letter O, McMahon's Chapel. In 1841, he wrote his autobiography. It was published, if we could change the next slide, classified in the next year in the New Orleans Christian Advocate. He illustrates folk Methodism on the frontier. He believed in frequent supernatural events, including healings. He describes vigorous religious experience, including the jerks and screaming and falling down unconscious. He founded numerous societies or congregations in Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana, as well as one in Texas. He died on March the 5th, 1854 in Louisiana. And 4 years later, his autobiography was published in the New Orleans Christian Advocate. Now, I want to tell you about a very different Methodist Episcopal Church itinerant preacher. Her name was Zilpha Elaw. She was an unauthorized itinerant preacher on the East Coast. We have an image associated with her, but it is suspiciously similar to images of Sojourner Truth. In fact, I think they're using the same images interchangeably between the two. Sojourner Truth had preached about 4 or 5 years before Zilpha Elaw began preaching. If we could move to the next slide. She was born at some point after 1790 in Pennsylvania into a free black family. She was brought up in Philadelphia. She describes being raised by a Quaker family after the death of her mother in 1802. In 1808, she joined a society of the Methodist Episcopal Church. A few years later, after having rather undramatic experiences of conviction and conversion, she had a dramatic experience of entire sanctification, and sort of typical of that age, felt called to preach immediately after that experience. In 1823, she opened a school in that area for African American children. In 1825, she began to engage in missions among enslaved people in Maryland and Virginia and other slaveholding states. She began preaching without authorization long before women were authorized to preach in the Methodist Episcopal Church. You may know it was not until 1873 that Anna Howard Shaw was granted a license to preach in the M.E. Church, despite John Wesley's own support for women being recognized as preachers. Between 1827 and 40, she preached in the United States, including many trips to Maryland and Virginia, where she faced the great risk of being captured and sold into slavery herself. But at great risk to herself and her family, she carried out this unauthorized preaching mission. In 1840, she moved to England and lived there and preached there for 5 years. In 1846, she really self-published in London her autobiography entitled Memoirs of the Life, Religious Experience, and Ministerial Travels and Labors of Mrs. Zilpha Elaw, an American female of color, together with some accounts of the great religious revivals in America. I love titles of books in that age. They give you the whole cliff notes in the title. She returned to the United States after 1846, and her subsequent life is undocumented. We don't even know when she died and where she was buried. She was willing to admit that her earlier religious experiences were not as dramatic as other Methodists described. Her conversion was more or less a gradual experience, and she had some boldness actually in saying that, because she didn't conform to the pattern that was expected for telling her story at that time. If we could ask then, what is it that William Stevenson and Zilpha Elaw and probably lots of other of these itinerants in this period of absolutely remarkable growth, what did they have in common? I would identify at least these points. They were both highly motivated, self-starting, very creative, and I think Bishop Grant Hagia's term entrepreneurial is a very good term to describe both of these people. They're out there starting their own ministries, self-publishing, writing to support their ministries and so forth, and they do this very much on their own. Secondly, they had no formal education. William Stevenson was not living in any place where there were institutions of higher education. He actually taught music and lower grades, but both of them give evidence of deep study. I've written a paper on William Stevenson's Echoes of John Wesley, and they give evidence of very, very strong writing skills that they had developed on their own, communication skills. They both describe vivid religious experiences and miracles, as Methodists tended to do in that period. They had itchy feet. These are people who really wanted to travel. You know, if somebody in Bug Tussle decides to leave there and go to Garrett Evangelical or Duke or Candler, or where's that in Dallas? Perkins School of Theology, it might be a good sign that these are folks who want to move, they want to get on, they want to see the world. And that's the way these folks and other itinerants really work. They acted without authorization from church authorities. William Stevenson undertook this trip to Arkansas at the invitation of his brother, and so far as I know, without any consultation with his presiding elder or the bishop in that area. My question then is very straightforward. Would your Board of Ordained Ministry approve William Stevenson, Zilpha Elah, or contemporary people with similar profiles to them? You want to say yes right now because I've depicted them as kind of Methodist heroes, but really, do they meet the profile? If our psychological testing in particular looks for stability as a desirable quality in clergy, I kind of doubt these folks are going to make it on that kind of test. So a second question I might ask: how might your board encourage and identify candidates with traits similar to those of William Stevenson and Zilpha Elah? What are you going to do to find those kind of self-starting, creative, entrepreneurial people and encourage their gifts for ministry? And finally, final question that's very much like the question that we raised last night in our discussion in the South Central Jurisdiction group. How might our processes need to change to enable us to find and encourage candidates for ministries with these kinds of leadership traits? I'm going to leave you with those questions for your meditation and thoughts, and look forward to our conversation.
Great, thank you. Ted, 2 words describe your presentation. Kick ass. Thank you. Our last presenter, Gail, if you'd come forward.
Thank you. I just love following Ted. It is an honor to serve with each of you and to be present with all of you as well. Thank you so much for putting up that slide. My task was to be the practical one, and at the conference level, how do we answer the very questions that Ted raised for us? In the Texas Annual Conference, we were greatly concerned about how do we develop these excellent leaders, pastors, that can meet the needs of today's challenges. It's so true that the vast majority of our clergy are excellent. Day in and day out, they reflect the vision of the Texas Annual Conference for vibrant, growing congregations, changing lives, and reshaping futures for Jesus Christ. They manifest the ethos of our Episcopal leader, Bishop Huey, who shared with the Board of Ministry several years ago what excellent clergy should be. Will you put that slide up? Thank you. A lifelong learner, a turnaround pastor, deeply committed Christian, an adaptive leader. Does this sound like yesterday morning? An entrepreneurial thinker, a creative preacher, courageous innovator, a loving pastor. These attributes, of course, as she shared these with the board and of course with the cabinet, we also had to go back with how do you help find these very people? It used to be so much easier. We just had a natural pipeline. Bishop Huey wrote a paper about this. It used to be that we raised them from cradle, that we had wonderful pastors coming our way. And you know how it was. Many of us fit this bill who are in this room today. We grew up in the Methodist Church, and we went to MYF, and we were taught how to go to Methodist colleges, and the Wesley Foundation helped continue to groom us, and we received calls, and then we went to Methodist seminaries, and there you have it. But that pipeline has rusted out. And so how is it we develop an ecosystem or a whole ecology that helps us recruit and find the necessary and talented people we need to be the very kick-ass preachers that Ted's talking about? And that's where we have to develop from the very beginning a culture of call in our local churches and in our annual conferences. Gil Rendell has said, what you pay attention to is what you get. And so our district superintendents go to charge conferences, and they say, so how many young people, when's the last time you had a person go into ministry from this church? And they laugh, and they say, how do you expect to have a clergy person here if that isn't happening? And so we're training lay people to look around and say, who among you could be a gifted pastor? And so that's the very beginning. It's just beginning to develop that cultural call. That's so important for us. So none of us can do this alone. We must be in relationship to others. And that's why our center is constantly adapting to develop opportunities to help clergy at every stage of development, from beginning to identify whether there's a youth among us. You've heard Adam Hamilton say when he meets in confirmation classes that he asks the confirmands themselves, look around you. I want you to write on a piece of paper, who do you think among you could be a preacher someday? I mean, friends, that's developing that call system really, really early. So that ecology, that call, if you'll put that next slide up for me, please. So this is where we begin this process. We try to recruit gifted, young, diverse clergy from within our annual conference in a variety of ways. And we start very young within our camping system, and also we try to provide in-depth educational opportunities. The Texas Youth Academy is for high school juniors and seniors. It's 2 weeks summer. It's very heavy theology for them and missional opportunities. And to be honest with you, we patterned it after the Duke Youth Academy. Steal away. Take good ideas and steal. We're really good at that. The college pastoral internship builds upon that. When folks are in college, we help them identify, they can work with pastors during the summer. We pay them a stipend so they can further develop and discern, am I called to ministry, or is there a different kind of lay ministry they want to be involved in? That's a great way for them to do it too. As you know, debt is really an important it's very confining for our young clergy. We try to help them out with the Ambassador's Grant. As you know, many of you do the same thing. We try to take care of those that we identify are in seminary. We make sure we do seminary visits. We stay in touch with them. We make sure there are people at seminary that draw our folks together, take care and nurture those that we have. Those are called junior ambassadors. Camp chaplains, or when we have kids off at camp, we make sure there are people there that if they've identified that they think they may have a call to ministry, we make sure that we stay in touch with them. All of that going back to that whole cultural call in our ecosystem. The Candidacy Summit, many of you are now doing that. We try to have a consistent voice. We try to make that a very good experience where they're in with their mentors. They develop a strong connection with those mentors at this Candidacy Summit. They hear the same words. We think that's really important, and it's a high value for us. Also, as we continue for college students, exploration events, of course, that you know about, and the collaboration with colleges and campus ministries. I've talk to you also about seminary. Next slide, please. We sustain opportunities for clergy to grow personally, professionally, spiritually. We try to think about that as we take care of clergy from the time of high school all the way to the grave. We do give grave markers, you know. We try to think about in terms of a plate. And just like there's a food pyramid, or used to be for healthy eating, we also try to encourage clergy to think about that in terms of a plate with the KSAPs. And that we have a tendency to choose continuing education events for ourselves that just feed the stuff that we like. So, we love to preach, so we just keep going back and taking more preaching classes. But are we thinking about not only skills that we already know, but are we pulling for spiritual formation and also personal characteristics that we need to build on too? So if we look at that plate of a well-fed person, what is it that we can do also to feed our spirits and also skill sets? What happens there? So we liked what we were hearing with the assessment yesterday to help clergy better understand what is it I need to draw from this year to help me stay well-rounded, well-focused, well-trained, to help our continuing effort to be lifelong learners. And so here are some of the things we do. The gathering is for all clergy. We have a wonderful bishop that attends the gathering, serves communion, is available to us, has a session with us. That goes a long way. This is an educational event as well as opportunity to play together as colleagues, and that's a great thing. We offer sabbaticals out of the Center for Clergy Excellence. We provide intentional interims to come into the church to do that. The conference pays for those interims so that the clergy can go off on sabbaticals. We think that's really crucial in order to maintain good health and lifelong learning. Advancing Pastoral Leadership is for young clergy. It's a wonderful way for them to grow. This helps us since we've lost that stair step where we learn that way. How do we intentionally learn and gain wisdom? The Advanced Pastoral Leadership Program is what helps us be able to do that. Refresh is a wonderful wing we stole from the North Texas Conference. It is designed to really refresh persons at 5-year intervals in continual ministry. And it's a 9-month program that allows them, all of us, to re-examine our call to ministry and what does it look like in the next 5 years. There's marriage and singles retreats, young clergy enrichment, you see that there. The itinerary and relocation events happen every spring to help folks do great transitions if they're moving. Continuing education seminars. The pre-retirement seminar is not only financial. We've learned that folks, we've done a poor job of helping people think about retirement as the third stage or third chapter in their life. And so oftentimes people are not prepared well to enjoy retirement and to see that as an opportunity to continue to grow closer to God. And we try desperately to help them be able to do that. Also, the clergy peer groups, young clergy events, equipping folks always around elders retreat, deacons retreat, the fellowship, of course, of local pastors. We had a pastoral leadership project that was for those who were older because, of course, the occasional comment that you do a lot of stuff for younger clergy, what about us? That was a total failure. Okay, not a total failure. There were a few people that went to it, but it just wasn't our best effort. And, you win some, you lose some. And so the Refresh program has been better, and we're starting the second year of that at the end of this month. So live and learn. And I should tell you, now that I see my notes, Refresh is recognize, reflection, resourcing, rejoicing, so that we grow as leaders. We provide resources for clergy accountability. If you'll go back to that slide, please. We love the Berkman Personality and Leadership Style Assessment. We use that with incoming clergy in their REMs, and we use it again at Refresh. We build on that. We think it's a great tool for us to understand ourselves as leaders, and we're very blessed to have many trained folks in that area. Of course, we do sexual ethics training, strategies to help with conflict resolution, and we're big on coaching. Our office is able to help provide coaches for folks, and we use it in a number of settings, and that's worked really well for us. The next slide, please. We offer support so clergy can thrive. We're grateful for a comment someone made about health and wellness. This is huge for us. We have a day of wellness. You can lower your insurance cost in our annual conference if you participate in that. The majority of our clergy have. We have a walking program. It's a direct way to be able to earn rewards. If you maintain a wonderful BMI, we'll pay you for that. If you lose weight, we'll pay you for that. We think it's that important for us to stay healthy and whole. You can see the other items there. I have some copies of our Ecology of Call I'm happy to share. We do believe that it's critically important that as we recruit new clergy, that it's also critical that we support and love the clergy we have. They're our greatest resource, and it's my honor to serve them.
Thank you, Gail. And what I'd like to do just for a couple of moments is just let you kind of eavesdrop on a conversation between the four of us, and then we're going to move very quickly into your table talk conversations. And here's the question for the three of you, based on what we've just talked about. What are the big, bold steps that we need to be taking?
Well,
just jump in.
Think differently. I think we have to, we had a wonderful presentation a little earlier. In order for us to get to the promised land, to be able to do some of the things we heard Bishop Hygieia talking to us about yesterday, we're going to have to leave Egypt and dust off that sand and get Egypt out of us. And for me, that really means what we were laughing about from your questions, Ted, is the truth is we have to let it go. Anyone to sing a round of that? And we can talk about all the reasons that it's scary and it's hard and we make mistakes. But in order for us to be the church we want to be, to meet the mission field and to reach the very people we do not have, we can't keep doing it the way we've always done it. And we're going to have to try new and different. And when it doesn't work, we let it go. But we have to be willing to risk. And when we've done that, it's worked for us. Okay. And now we also have to support those entrepreneurial pastors in different ways. But at the same time, we have to let go of the stuff that reminds us of Egypt and focus in on the very paths that will get us to the mission field that we do not reach right now.
Great. Go ahead. Jump in.
I think one of the bold, courageous, and prophetic steps we must take, without a doubt, when we look at our changing demographics in our local communities, where we have in past created barriers and blocks and obstacles that are not intentionally related to racism per se or sexism, but it's a matter of not understanding and having a sincere desire to engage in deep, real conversations with acknowledgments of our different cultural experiences that will enable both clergy and lay to prepare itself not only for cross-racial appointments, for real integration of our cultures in a way that mutual respect and appreciation can occur, with the ultimate goal of building God's kingdom in a very multicultural society that is inevitably coming to us head on. And I think that in order for us to prepare for the kingdom of God, we've got to take the bold steps. It's not going to be easy. It hasn't been easy. But we must take the bold step and cross these boundaries of cultural, racial, sexual, gender kind of understandings in order for our churches to grow and to flourish and to be vital in every sphere of its life.
Ted?
I'd offer an idea, and that is based on the description of Zilpha Elaw and William Stevenson that I gave. What happened historically was that from the 1870s, itineracy as it had been practiced in their time ended basically when congregations came to pay clergy. And what that meant was that the last thing on earth a congregation wants their pastor to do is go out and start a new religious community that's not part of that community who's paying their salary. So I want to propose that we think about a new kind of itinerant ministry. I'm thinking of the younger people, our daughters' ages, who tend not to get married now until they're late in their 20s or in their 30s, who have some time when they'd like to do wild and crazy things, and think about a kind of order that would exist that would basically involve a 4 to 5 year commitment to live in what would be essentially poverty, but with a kind of license, a kind of freedom that says you can go start new religious communities even on the doorsteps of existing United Methodist congregations. Go out there and surprise us and show us some new stuff.
So Ted, you know what's interesting is what you just described. I'm working with a group of pastors in Brazil. That's exactly what they're doing. So what we're calling bold is normal.
Not for the
for others. How does that become normal for us? This is for all of us.
We are doing some of that.
Okay.
But you have to have people who believe and are willing to risk and are willing to let it fail. But it's exactly that. But guess who the preachers are that are doing that? They're the risk takers. They don't look like you and me coming down the pike. They scare the hoo-hoo out of boards of ministry and district committees. And their psychological profile, peaks off of the charts. But that's exactly, I think, what we have to be willing to do.
I think to add to that, I think a great opportunity is for us to look at the massive number of men and women who are incarcerated and yet going through a revolutionary, conversionary experience during the time that they are in prison, and how do we receive them when they are released? So reentry and giving special attention to those men and women who have really gone through a very deep, sincere conversionary experience and have a sense of call, and yet our boards of ordained ministry and our local churches and our district boards of ordained ministry seldom give serious thought and recognition of the vitality of which they bring to us, with an understanding of an environment that many of us have no clue. And how do we reach a certain core of our constituency within our community, especially in the urban communities, and I'm speaking of African Americans, Latinos, especially when you look at the disproportionate number of men and women who are incarcerated and now re-entering into the community and with no place to go that would embrace them with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and giving them an opportunity to preach and teach and to be a part of our ordination process in some way.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to them in just a moment. You get a chance to say one parting word, each of you. One word to the group before we do table talk.
Grace.
Peace.
Connected to God.
All right. Now it's your turn to do some table talk among each other. What I'd like you to do around your table is just talk about what are the bold steps that you need to be taking now, as well as how do you support boldness. What are the bold steps that we need to be taking now, as well as how do we support boldness? And you have about 15 minutes, and at 10:15, you can just take a break.